to get power from a battery into the third generation alternator, you're going to need a cable that carries enough current so that you can get power from the alternator into the battery. And for this, I use a Fusible Link. And this is about, I think it's 12 gauge wire. And by itself, that wire is not adequate. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to unravel this Fusible Link and cut it in half and terminate all ends so that I can have two fusible links running in parallel between the alternator output terminal and to the positive battery terminal, but I'll be making the connection at the starter relay. So you want two of these fusible links running in parallel where they both carry half of whatever load is being sent to the battery. So what I'll do is I'll simply take this Fusible Link out from its package. I'm going to unwrap this tie wire, and then I'm going to stretch this out and cut it in half. Okay, I have the Fusible Link cut in half. So at the ends of each of the two remaining wire segments, I'm going to put on a round eyelet that will be connected to the alternator battery output. I have an eyelet in a special adapter that is made to connect to the third generation alternator battery output terminal. And what I did is I selected two other round terminals to connect to the new Fusible Link wires at one end. And what I'll be doing is I am going to put some shrinking tubing on the wire at the end. I will attach and crimp this, and then I'm going to use a hot air gun to shrink this insulation, and then I'm going to move this up the wire over this shrunk tubing and use a hot air gun to shrink wrap this onto the wire itself. Here I have stripped the insulation off of both of the Fusible Link wiring segments, and I twisted the conductive copper wiring inside to help the wire keep its shape as I put them each into their eyelet terminal units. Here I have put the shrink wrap tubing over the end of one wire. Now I have put the round eye terminal over the white conductive wire, and now I'm going to use some crimping pliers to go ahead and crimp that terminal in place. Now the round eye terminal has been crimped into place, so now I will apply hot air to shrink that blue plastic cover. Even though that blue insulator coating should be enough that I shrunk down to keep that insulated and secure and watertight, I'm going to slide this black shrink wrap tubing up here and repeat the process of applying the hot air from the hot air gun to shrink that tubing down. Okay, the heat shrink tube has been heated up and shrunk into place, and you can see that the black insulating tube is a much smaller diameter now than it was before. Also, this shrink wrap tubing has a 4-to-1 size reduction when heat is applied, and it has a heat sensitive adhesive inside that will melt. And if you look at the very tip where the black is, you'll see that there is a cleared adhesive that has melted under heat and is now sealing to make sure water does not get inside this part of the shrink wrap. So this is essentially a waterproof seal. Here on the second Fusible Link end, I have also attached the correct round eyelet at the end of the wire and crimped it. And I'm now going to apply heat to the blue insulation that is shrink wrap to begin the final wrapping process. Okay, that has been shrink wrapped down, and now I will apply and put in place the black shrink wrap tube, and now I'm going to shrink that down. Okay, now both ends of the two Fusible Link wires are ready to be installed onto the alternator output terminal. Both have had the terminals put into place, crimped, and then the terminal connection itself is protected with heat shrink tubing, so the water will not be able to get into these and cause corrosion. For the other end of the Fusible Links, I'm going to be using a larger round eyelet terminal so it will connect to the starter relay. That is what is going to put battery power down to these two Fusible Links that then goes to the alternator. And I'm going to take both ends of the Fusible Links together and connect them with this one single yellow insulation round eyelet terminal. In this case here, I took the exposed conductive wiring after I stripped the two ends of the remaining Fusible Link, and I fanned them out. And what I'll do is I will merge these wires together, twist it, and then I will put the shrink wrap tubing down the two wires and then connect them to a larger diameter eyelet to attach to the positive terminal on the starter relay, which goes directly to positive battery power. This is both wires pushed together and then twisted together, and I'm now ready to put the larger diameter eyelet terminal on it. And here I have the terminal pushed onto the wire that's been twisted, and you can see at the very end where the wiring gets pushed through, you can see the ends of those wires. So I'm now going to crimp those down to hold them in place. And you may not be able to tell, but I did crimp the metal inside the yellow plastic, and you can see the end of the wire is still coming through the eyelet terminal. So now I'm going to go ahead and put shrink wrap tubing over this piece, and then I'm going to apply hot air to that yellow plastic sheath, which is shrink wrap. Okay, here I've gone ahead and completed using hot air on the yellow shrink wrap tubing, and you can see that it has shrunk down and encapsulated the wire and the terminal. Next, I'm going to use hot air on the larger shrink wrap tubing down here. After sliding it up toward the end of this wire and terminal and complete shrink wrapping and protecting that. Here is how I have pre-positioned the black shrink wrap tube so that it will cover everything that has already been shrink wrapped, and it'll add another layer of protection. So what we have now is two Fusible Link wires combined into a single terminal that will be installed on the starter relay positive terminal, which is fed directly to the battery positive post. And then the other end of that Fusible Link comes up to two terminals with round end connectors that will be attached to the alternator positive battery output. In addition, we have the wiring that goes to the internal voltage regulator and the alternator, which is a third generation alternator. And with this harness, this yellow wire also attaches to the alternator battery output terminal. The white wire with black stripe with a gray terminal end is the stator output. In the case of this vehicle, it doesn't plug into anything because the carburetor is an aftermarket Holley carburetor and requires a full 12 volts of switched power to work correctly. The stator output is not only one half of the alternator output voltage instead of full voltage, but it's also alternating or AC current instead of DC direct current. The only place this gets used on the 1973 Mustang is for the manufacturer installed carburetor with electric chokes. Your carburetor is aftermarket. It needs 12 volts, and I have a different video showing how to set that up. the green wire has a red stripe. And this connects to switched voltage, 12 volt, and basically gets spliced into the existing wiring harness that had been used with the old voltage regulator. I will have a different or an additional location in this video showing where it is spliced into. Now, currently with the original alternator, the wiring on your Mustang has a voltage regulator that looks a lot like this. It might be a little taller with a blue cap, or it might also be metallic silver and relatively flat. This unit totally replaces your old voltage regulator. Now, I would not throw the old voltage regulator away. You might need it later on, or maybe for a different car. Down here on the black connector, what you do is you unplug the wiring harness from the voltage regulator, install this, and plug it back into the original regulator harness. Internally, it has all the connections you need to convert to a third generation alternator, along with the wiring that you'll have between the third generation alternator. Voltage regulator plug is an internal voltage regulator, where the yellow and green or red plug in. And we also have this double wired Fusible Link, where you have the two smaller terminals attaching to the third generation alternator battery outlet, and this larger terminal attaching to the positive connection on the starter relay, which then connects directly to the battery positive terminal. And once you have all that connected, you should be able to start that car up and find that the alternator is providing voltage to the battery and the rest of the system, keeping it charged. I will be providing some blue conduit to put around the wires of the voltage regulator harness. And there is a longer piece of conduit that you can use to put around the power wires with the Fusible Link. So it'll be nice and pretty looking once you have it all together. Put the two Fusible Link power wires inside the blue conduit, so the wires are inside. And that is how nice it's going to look. You won't have wires all over the place. And I'll send some wire ties that you can use so you can wrap that around this conduit and attach it to other components under the hood, so you can try to keep it nice and neat and out of the way of any moving parts like the fan blades, the fan belt, stuff like that. But I think it looks pretty good. I like how that power wire, the Fusible Links, turned out with the blue conduit so much. I decided to do the internal voltage regulator wiring harness also. So those three wires are inside their conduit as well.